All right, let's dive into a classic PMP exam puzzle. We're going to put on our detective hats for this one, because this scenario, well, it looks pretty straightforward on the surface, but there's a hidden clue inside that changes everything. So, let's open up the case file. Okay, so here's the situation. Our project manager hits a snag. The grader she wanted isn't available. Smart move. She pivots, gets two smaller ones, and even hires an extra person to operate the second machine. But here's the question. What is she least likely to do next? And that word right there, least, that's the whole ballgame. We're not looking for the right move. We're hunting for the one action that's totally out of place.
You know, in any good mystery, the first thing you do is search for clues. And PMP questions are no different. They throw a lot of details at you, but there's almost always one specific phrase, one little piece of evidence that tells you exactly where you are in the story. Let's find it.
And boom, there it is. That's our smoking gun. The phrase acquiring resources isn't just some casual detail. No, it's a direct signal, a giant flashing sign pointing to a very specific process in the project lifecycle. This clue tells us we are firmly in the executing phase of the project. This is, without a doubt, the most important piece of information in the whole scenario.
So what does acquire resources actually mean? Well, it's the get it done phase. The planning is over, now you're in the thick of it. You're actually getting the people, the equipment, the supplies, everything you need to do the work. Understanding that we are in this action phase, this execution phase, that's the key that's going to unlock this whole puzzle for us.
Okay, so now we know when this is all happening. So let's look at our options, our 4 suspects. We're going to line them up, and 3 of them are going to have a perfect alibi. They belong right here in this phase. But one is an imposter. So let's start by checking out the actions that actually make sense. First up in our lineup, we have Suspect B, modify the resource requirements. Does this action fit the scene?
Oh, absolutely. The plan changed, right? They went from one big grader to 2 smaller ones. So of course, the resource requirements document needs to be updated to show it's actually happening on the ground. That's just good project management. So suspect B, totally plausible. Cleared.
All right, next suspect. Let's look at option C, adjust the resource breakdown structure, or the RBS for short.
Okay, so the RBS is basically your project's master inventory list. We've got new equipment, 2 graders, and a new person on the team. You absolutely have to log those new resources in the RBS to keep your record straight. Makes perfect sense. Suspect C is also cleared.
And that brings us to our last plausible suspect, option D, revise the stakeholder register. What's the story here?
Well, think about it. A new operator was just hired, and guess what? Every single team member is a stakeholder. So that stakeholder register, which is the official list of everyone involved in the project, it's got to be updated to include this new person. Another perfectly logical action. So suspect D is in the clear.
So we've checked out B, C, and D. They all have rock-solid alibis. They fit perfectly within the acquire resources process. And if they're all innocent, that can only mean one thing. It is time to unmask our imposter.
And the action that just doesn't belong is option A, create the resource management plan. This is our answer. This is the thing our project manager is least likely to do. But why? Well, it all comes down to the fundamental order of how projects work.
And here it is, the big reveal. You create the resource management plan way back in the planning phase, but our project manager is well past that. She's deep in the executing phase, acquiring resources. You can't be creating the blueprint for the house after you've already started putting up the walls. That plan had to exist long before she even knew which grader she needed.
See, the real trick here is that one little word, create. Could our project manager update the plan now based on this new situation? Yeah, for sure, that can happen. But the option says create it from scratch, and that ship has already sailed. That's a one-time event that happens way back at the beginning. It just goes to show you how a single verb can be the key to the entire question.
So, case closed. But what's the real lesson here for you when you're sitting for the PMP exam? How do we turn this one solution into a strategy you can use over and over again? Let's break it down.
Okay, first and foremost, always remember the PMP exam is secretly a test of process order. So your first job is to figure out where you are. Are you planning? Executing? Closing? Once you've got your bearings, you can start eliminating any actions that belong in a previous phase. And finally, you have to be a hawk for those keywords. Verbs like create, update, modify, they aren't interchangeable. They have very specific meanings, and often they're the deciding factor.
And that pretty much wraps up this breakdown. We saw how just by identifying the process and zooming in on the right keyword, we could take apart a really tricky question. So, I'll leave you with this to think about. Now that you know what to look for, what other timing traps are out there just waiting for a sharp detective like you to find them?